Marcus Chen wiped the grease from his hands with a rag that had seen better decades, squinting through the perpetual haze of Nexus Station's lower levels. The massive space station orbited the neutral zone between three major galactic powers, making it a haven for smugglers, traders, and anyone else who preferred to conduct business away from prying government eyes. For a human mechanic trying to scrape together enough credits to repair his own ship, it was both paradise and purgatory. The Wandering Wrench, his small repair shop wedged between a Krylian spice dealer and a Vorthan weapons merchant, barely generated enough income to keep the lights on. Most aliens viewed human engineering as primitive at best, preferring the sleek efficiency of their own technologies. But Marcus had learned that sometimes primitive meant reliable, and reliability was something the galaxy's more sophisticated races often overlooked in their pursuit of perfection. His communicator buzzed with an incoming message from Zephyr, his Altarian business partner and the closest thing he had to a friend on this forsaken station. The message was brief. Emergency auction tonight. Level 47. Bring credits if you have any. Trust me on this. Marcus frowned at the cryptic message. Zephyr wasn't one for dramatics, and emergency auctions usually meant stolen goods or worse. But their partnership had been profitable enough, and the blue-skinned Altarian had never steered him wrong before. Besides, he needed parts for the atmospheric recycler, and the legitimate dealers were asking prices that would bankrupt him. He locked up the shop and made his way through the station's maze-like corridors. Nexus Station was a sprawling city in space, home to over 2 million beings from hundreds of different worlds. The lower levels, where rent was cheap and questions were rarely asked, attracted the galaxy's more colorful residents. Neon signs in a dozen different languages advertised everything from exotic foods to questionable medical procedures, while the air recyclers struggled to filter out the mixture of alien pheromones and industrial fumes. Level 47 was deeper than Marcus usually ventured, in a section of the station where even the security forces feared to patrol alone. The auction house was a converted cargo bay, its walls lined with holding cells and display cases containing items of dubious origin. The crowd was typical for such events, a mixture of species that would normally never share the same space, united only by their desire for bargains and their willingness to ask no questions about provenance. Marcus spotted Zephyr's distinctive blue skin and silver hair near the back of the crowd. His friend's usually calm demeanor seemed agitated, his large black eyes scanning the auction items with unusual intensity. When he noticed Marcus approaching, he grabbed the human's arm with surprising urgency. "Thank the void you came," Zephyr whispered, his voice carrying the melodic quality common to his species. "This auction is different. There are things here that should not exist." Before Marcus could ask what he meant, the auctioneer took the stage. The being was a Morphak, one of the slug-like species known for their complete lack of ethics when it came to commerce. Its translator collar rendered its slimy speech into standard Galactic. "Welcome, distinguished buyers, to tonight's special collection. We have items recovered from recently abandoned vessels, unclaimed cargo from failed expeditions, and some truly unique specimens that I guarantee you have never seen before." The first few lots were typical salvage, outdated weapons, exotic minerals, and the occasional piece of art from some long-dead civilization. Marcus bid successfully on a case of rare earth magnets that would be perfect for his repair work, but he could sense Zephyr's growing tension as the auction progressed. "Lot 27, the auctioneer announced, and even his translator seemed to struggle with whatever emotion colored his next words. "A biological specimen of unknown origin. Previous owners attempted to classify it as a domesticated creature, but breeding programs were unsuccessful. The specimen shows signs of genetic drift and abnormal coloration. Current owners seek immediate disposal." Two hulking Braktar guards wheeled out a large cage covered by a heavy tarp. Even before they pulled it away, Marcus could hear something moving inside, accompanied by soft whimpering sounds that seemed almost familiar. When the tarp was removed, the crowd's reaction was immediate and visceral. Gasps of disgust echoed through the auction hall. Several beings actually stepped backward, as if the sight of the creature was somehow offensive. In the cage was what appeared to be a wolf pup, but unlike any wolf Marcus had ever seen. Its fur was completely white, so pale it seemed to glow under the harsh auction lights. Its eyes were a startling red, the telltale sign of albinism that made many alien species uncomfortable due to their cultural superstitions about genetic anomalies. But what struck Marcus most was not the creature's unusual appearance, but its obvious distress. The pup couldn't have been more than a few months old, and it was clearly malnourished and frightened. It pressed itself against the back of the cage, trembling as hundreds of alien eyes stared at it with a mixture of curiosity and revulsion. "The bidding will start at 50 credits, the auctioneer announced. though his tone suggested he expected no bids at all. This specimen has been deemed unsuitable for breeding, combat, or consumption by its previous owners. Current medical assessment suggests it may not survive to maturity due to genetic defects associated with its coloration. The auction hall fell silent. Marcus looked around at the assembled crowd and realized that none of them saw any value in the frightened creature. To them, it was damaged goods, a genetic mistake that served no practical purpose. The silence stretched on, broken only by the pup's continued whimpering. No bids? The auctioneer seemed surprised, though Marcus suspected it was merely theatre. Very well, we shall move to the next 50 credits. The words left Marcus's mouth before he fully realized he had spoken. Every eye in the auction hall turned to him, and he could feel the weight of their collective confusion. A human bidding on what they considered a worthless genetic aberration was clearly beyond their comprehension. We have 50 credits from the human, the auctioneer said, unable to hide his amusement. Ah! Any other bidders? The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat as the auctioneer went through the formalities of closing the bidding. When the hammer fell, he owned something that the rest of the galaxy considered worthless. Zephyr appeared at his elbow as Marcus made his way to the payment station. Have you lost your mind? His friend whispered urgently. That thing is an albino. Do you know what that means to most species in this galaxy? Marcus handed over his credits to the bored-looking clerk, trying not to think about how the purchase had nearly emptied his savings account. It means it's different, he said simply, and scared, and needs help. Different is one word for it, Zephyr muttered. Cursed is another. Bad luck. Genetic poison. There are dozens of cultures that believe albino creatures carry disease or misfortune. Why do you think no one else bid? The clerk handed Marcus a receipt and a small remote control. Cage is programmed to follow you, she explained in a bored tone. Good luck with your purchase. No returns, no warranties, no guarantees of survival. Marcus activated the remote and watched as the cage began to hover and move toward the exit. The wolf pup inside had stopped whimpering, but its red eyes followed his every movement with an intelligence that seemed far beyond what a simple animal should possess. As they left the auction house, Zephyr continued his protests. You know nothing about caring for whatever that thing is. You don't even know what it eats, or if it carries diseases, or if it's even fully animal. Some of those genetic modifications they do in the outer colonies create things that are more than they appear. Marcus stopped walking and turned to face his friend. Look at it, Zephyr. Really look at it. The Altarian moved closer to the cage, his large eyes studying the creature within. The wolf pup had curled up in the corner, its white fur matted and dirty, its ribs showing through its sides. When it noticed Zephyr's attention, it didn't snarl or try to hide. Instead, it looked up at him with those strange red eyes, and Marcus could swear he saw hope flickering there. It's just a baby, Marcus said softly. Whatever else it is, whatever genetic modifications were done to it, it's just a frightened baby that needs someone to care about it. Zephyr was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he sighed in the way that Marcus had learned meant his friend was giving up on an argument he knew he couldn't win. Humans, Zephyr muttered, shaking his head. Your species has a talent for adopting lost causes. Very well, but we're taking it to my ship. I have better medical equipment than your workshop, and if this creature is carrying any diseases, we need to know before it infects half the station. They made their way through the lower levels, the floating cage drawing curious and often hostile stares from other residents. Marcus could hear snippets of conversation in various languages, most of them centering on words that his translator rendered as variations of cursed, unnatural, and death omen. By the time they reached the docking bay where Zephyr kept his small merchant vessel, Marcus was beginning to understand the magnitude of what he had gotten himself into. Zephyr's ship, the Silver Current, was a sleek Altarian design that managed to be both practical and beautiful. The medical bay was better equipped than some hospitals Marcus had seen, a necessity for a merchant who often traveled to worlds where human medicine was unavailable. They transferred the wolf pup to a sterile examination chamber, and Zephyr began running scans with equipment that looked more like art than medical devices. The creature remained remarkably calm throughout the process, as if it understood that these strange beings were trying to help it. Interesting, Zephyr murmured, studying the readouts on his screens. Very interesting indeed. What is it? Marcus asked, though he was more focused on the pup itself. Up close, he could see that beneath the dirt and malnutrition, the creature was actually quite beautiful. Its white fur had a subtle silver sheen, and those red eyes held an intelligence that was definitely not entirely animal. Well, the good news is that it's not carrying any diseases that my scanners can detect, Zephyr said. The bad news is that it's not entirely natural. Genetic scans show clear signs of modification, though the techniques used are unlike anything in my databases. What kind of modifications? Zephyr manipulated his controls, and a three-dimensional image of the creature's DNA appeared in the air above them. Even to Marcus's untrained eye, it was obviously artificial in places, with sections that glowed differently from the base genetic structure. Intelligence enhancement, for one thing, Zephyr explained. Whoever created this creature wanted it to be smart, probably too smart for its own good, given how most species feel about intelligent animals. There are also modifications to its sensory systems, its bone density, and something I can't quite identify that seems to affect its cellular structure. Is it healthy, malnourished and stressed, but fundamentally sound? The albinism appears to be natural rather than a side effect of the modifications, which probably explains why it was considered a failed experiment. Zephyr paused, studying another set of readings. Marcus, this creature was designed to be a companion. Specifically, a companion for someone with human-level intelligence and emotional needs. Marcus looked at the wolf pup, which had been listening to their conversation with obvious interest. When their eyes met, the creature's tail gave a small, tentative wag. You're saying someone created it to be a pet? Not a pet, Zephyr corrected. A friend. The intelligence modifications suggest it will be capable of complex reasoning and emotional bonds far beyond what any natural animal could achieve. Someone invested considerable resources in creating the perfect companion animal. Then why was it being auctioned off as worthless? Zephyr's expression darkened. Because most galactic species don't want companions that can think for themselves. They prefer their animals predictable and controllable. An intelligent creature with its own thoughts and feelings is considered dangerous by most cultures. Add in the albinism, which many species see as a bad omen, and you have something that no one wants. Marcus opened the examination chamber and slowly extended his hand toward the wolf pup. The creature hesitated for a moment, then crept forward and sniffed his fingers. Its nose was cold and wet against his skin. And when it looked up at him again, Marcus could swear he saw gratitude in those strange red eyes. Except humans, he said softly. Except humans, Zephyr agreed. Your species has an unusual relationship with intelligent animals. Most others either worship them or fear them, but humans seem to enjoy their company. The wolf pup allowed Marcus to gently stroke its head, and for the first time since he'd seen it in the cage, it seemed to relax. Its tail began to wag more enthusiastically, and it made a small sound that might have been contentment. What are you going to call it? Zephyr asked. Marcus hadn't thought about a name, but as he looked at the creature's unusual coloring, an idea came to him. Ghost, he said, for the white fur and the way everyone else seems afraid of it. The newly named Ghost seemed to approve of the name, its tail wagging even harder. It nuzzled against Marcus's hand, and he felt something he hadn't experienced in years of living alone on Nexus Station. The warmth of unconditional acceptance. Well, Ghost, Marcus said, carefully lifting the small creature from the examination table. I guess we're going to figure this out together. As he held the wolf pup against his chest, Marcus could feel its heartbeat steadying. Its fear gradually being replaced by something that might have been trust. He had no idea what he was getting himself into, no understanding of the forces that had created this remarkable creature, or why someone had gone to such lengths to engineer the perfect companion. All he knew was that for the first time in months, he didn't feel alone in the vast emptiness of space. And judging by the way Ghost was looking up at him, the feeling was mutual. Outside Zephyr's ship, Nexus Station continued its endless rotation, carrying its cargo of 2 million souls through the darkness between the stars. But in the medical bay of the Silver Current, a human mechanic and a genetically modified wolf pup were beginning a friendship that would soon challenge everything the galaxy thought it knew about the bonds between species. The auction was over, but the real adventure was just beginning. 3 weeks had passed since Marcus brought Ghost home to his small workshop, and the changes in both of them were remarkable. The malnourished, frightened creature from the auction had transformed into something extraordinary. Ghost's white fur now gleamed with health, his frame had filled out, and those intelligent red eyes sparkled with curiosity and affection. But it was the depth of their connection that truly amazed Marcus. Ghost wasn't just smart, he was brilliant. Within days of arriving at the workshop, he had learned to operate the basic lighting controls. Within a week, he could distinguish between different types of tools and would fetch the correct one when Marcus was working under a ship. But it was the emotional intelligence that truly set Ghost apart. He seemed to understand Marcus's moods, offering comfort during frustrating repairs and celebrating successes with enthusiastic tail-wagging. The workshop had become a different place entirely. Where once Marcus had worked alone in the cramped space between towering shelves of spare parts, now he had a constant companion who made even the most tedious repairs feel like adventures. Ghost would perch on a nearby workbench, watching intently as Marcus explained what he was doing, his head tilting in ways that suggested genuine understanding. "See this coupling here?" Marcus said, pointing to a damaged atmospheric unit he was repairing for a Corvan freighter. The previous owner tried to jerry-rig it with incompatible parts. That's why the seals failed. Ghost studied the component with focused attention, then looked back at Marcus and made a soft sound that had become their version of "I understand." It was one of many vocalizations the wolf had developed, each one carrying specific meaning in their growing language of communication. The transformation in Marcus himself was equally dramatic. The loneliness that had been his constant companion for years on Nexus Station had evaporated. He found himself talking more, laughing more, and approaching his work with an enthusiasm he hadn't felt since he'd first arrived in the outer colonies. Even his customers had begun to notice the change. "Your work has improved," Captain Vrex, a regular Corvan client, observed as he inspected the completed atmospheric repair. "More attention to detail. Better craftsmanship." Marcus glanced at Ghost, who was sitting quietly in the corner, trying to look like an ordinary pet. "I've had some help lately," he said simply. What Marcus didn't mention was just how much help Ghost had become. The wolf's enhanced intelligence meant he could spot problems that Marcus might miss. His keen senses could detect gas leaks or electrical faults before they became dangerous. And his memory was perfect. Ghost never forgot the location of a tool, the specifications of a part, or the details of a previous repair. But it was their partnership that truly made the difference. They worked together with a synchronization that seemed almost telepathic, anticipating each other's needs and movements. When Marcus needed a specific wrench, Ghost would have it ready before the request was made. When a repair required access to a tight space, Ghost could squeeze into areas no human could reach and manipulate controls with his paws or teeth. Their relationship hadn't gone unnoticed by the other residents of Nexus Station's lower levels. The alien community was small enough that news traveled fast, and within days, everyone knew about the human who had bought the cursed creature from the emergency auction. The reactions varied by species, but few were positive. The Cryalian spice dealer next door had begun wearing protective amulets and refused to enter Marcus's shop. The Vorthan weapons merchant spoke in whispers about genetic abominations and the human's obvious madness. Even some of the more tolerant species gave them a wide berth, unwilling to risk whatever misfortune they believed Ghost might bring. It was Zephyr who brought the first serious warning. The Altarian arrived at the workshop one evening looking more concerned than Marcus had ever seen him, his usual calm demeanor replaced by obvious anxiety. "We need to talk," Zephyr said, glancing around the workshop before settling his gaze on Ghost, who was helping Marcus organize spare parts. "Both of you." Marcus set down the plasma couplings he had been cataloging and gave his friend his full attention. Ghost padded over and sat beside Marcus's chair, sensing the seriousness of the moment. "There are rumors spreading through the station," Zephyr began carefully. "Some of the more superstitious species are becoming agitated about Ghost's presence. They're claiming that his arrival has brought bad luck to the lower levels." "What kind of bad luck?" Marcus asked, though he was already dreading the answer. "Equipment failures, cargo accidents, a food vendor got sick, nothing that couldn't be explained by normal station life. But when people want to find patterns, they will." Zephyr paused, his large black eyes showing genuine concern. "The problem is that these rumors are reaching the ears of people who have actual power on this station." Marcus felt a chill run through him. Nexus Station operated under a complex web of unofficial authority. While the official administration maintained the basic infrastructure and collected docking fees, real power lay with the various faction leaders, who controlled different aspects of the station's black market economy. If those leaders decided that Ghost was a threat to their operations, they could make life very difficult. "Who specifically?" Marcus asked. "Gorth Malik has been asking questions," Zephyr said, and Marcus's blood ran cold. Gorth Malik was a crime boss whose influence extended throughout the lower levels. The massive Braktar controlled everything from smuggling operations to protection rackets, and his word was law for thousands of residents. If Malik decided that Ghost was a problem, there would be nowhere on the station to hide. Ghost sensed Marcus's distress and moved closer, pressing his warm body against his human's leg in a gesture of comfort and solidarity. The simple act reminded Marcus of everything that mattered about their relationship. "What does he want?" Marcus asked quietly. "He wants to meet Ghost," Zephyr replied, "tomorrow night." His club on level 52. Marcus knew the club. The Black Nebula, a notorious establishment where Malik held court and conducted most of his business. It was the last place in the galaxy he wanted to take Ghost, but refusing Malik's invitation was not an option. "We'll be there," Marcus said, his voice steadier than he felt. That night, Marcus found himself unable to sleep. He sat in his workshop, Ghost curled up beside him on the old couch that served as furniture in the cramped space. The wolf seemed to sense his anxiety and had stayed close all evening, offering silent comfort with his presence. "I'm sorry," Marcus whispered, gently stroking Ghost's soft fur. "I should have thought this through better. Should have realized that bringing you here would cause problems." Ghost lifted his head and looked at Marcus with those intelligent red eyes. Then, in a gesture that never failed to amaze him, Ghost placed one paw on Marcus's hand and made a soft sound that clearly meant, "It's okay."
"You don't understand," Marcus continued. "These people, they don't see you the way I do."
"They don't see how smart you are, how loyal, how special. All they see is something different. Something that scares them." But even as he spoke, Marcus realized that wasn't entirely true. Ghost understood far more than any normal animal ever could. The genetic modifications that made him so intelligent also meant he was perfectly aware of the danger they faced. And yet, he remained calm, trusting Marcus to find a solution. The next day passed slowly, with both of them going through the motions of normal work while the evening appointment loomed over them. Marcus spent extra time grooming Ghost, making sure his white fur was perfectly clean and brushed. If they were going to face Malik, they would do it with dignity. As the station's artificial evening cycle began, they made their way to level 52. The Black Nebula was everything Marcus had expected. A dimly lit establishment filled with smoke and the low murmur of dangerous conversations. Alien music played in the background, a discordant blend of rhythms that seemed designed to put visitors on edge. Malik held court in a private booth at the back of the club, surrounded by a mixed group of enforcers from various species. The crime boss himself was an imposing figure, even by Braktar standards, nearly 3 meters tall with the distinctive ridged skull and powerful build of his people. His small eyes fixed on Marcus and Ghost as they approached, showing no emotion whatsoever. "So," Malik rumbled in, heavily accented standard Galactic, "this is the creature causing so much concern among my constituents." Marcus stood, as straight as he could manage, Ghost sitting calmly at his side. "This is Ghost," he said simply. "He's my companion and business partner." A ripple of surprise went through Malik's entourage at the word partner, but the crime boss himself showed no reaction. He leaned forward, studying Ghost with the intensity of a predator evaluating potential prey. "The reports say it is albino," Malik continued, "genetically cursed, that its presence brings misfortune." "The reports are wrong," Marcus said firmly. "Ghost has brought nothing but good fortune to anyone willing to treat him with respect." "Interesting," Malik mused. "Show me." It wasn't a request. Marcus looked down at Ghost, who met his gaze with calm confidence. They had practiced this moment, though Marcus had hoped it would never come. Ghost had learned to demonstrate his abilities in ways that were impressive without being threatening. Though Marcus wasn't sure how well that strategy would work with someone like Malik. "Ghost," Marcus said quietly. "Diagnostics." The wolf immediately moved to a nearby table where someone had left a handheld scanner. Without being asked, Ghost activated the device and began running it over the various electronics in the immediate area. When the scanner detected a malfunction in one of the club's security cameras, Ghost alerted Marcus with a specific vocalization they had developed for such situations. "Your security system has a fault," Marcus announced. "Camera 7 is operating at 40% efficiency due to a loose connection in the power coupling." Malik gestured to one of his technicians, who quickly confirmed the diagnosis. The crime boss's expression didn't change, but Marcus could sense a shift in the atmosphere around them. "Continue," Malik commanded. For the next hour, Ghost demonstrated a range of abilities, solving mechanical puzzles, identifying different materials by scent, and even playing what amounted to a memory game with colored lights. But it was his emotional intelligence that seemed to make the biggest impression. When one of Malik's enforcers made a threatening gesture, Ghost immediately positioned himself between the alien and Marcus, not aggressively, but with clear protective intent. "Loyalty," Malik observed. "Rare in this galaxy." Ghost doesn't know the meaning of betrayal, Marcus said proudly. Malik was quiet for a long moment, his small eyes moving between Marcus and Ghost. Finally, he spoke. There are those who would see this creature destroyed, he said bluntly. They fear what they do not understand. They believe that difference equals danger. Marcus's heart sank. He had hoped that demonstrating Ghost's abilities would change minds, but it seemed they were about to face the same prejudice on a much more dangerous scale. However, Malik continued, and Marcus felt a flicker of hope, I am not one of those people. The crime boss leaned back in his chair, his massive form dominating the booth. I have built my empire by recognizing value where others see only problems. This creature, this ghost, has value. Intelligence, loyalty, abilities that could be useful in the right circumstances. What are you suggesting? Marcus asked carefully. Partnership, Malik said simply. Your workshop handles legitimate repairs. Good cover for other activities. Your companion's abilities would be valuable for certain sensitive operations. In exchange, you have my protection. No one on this station will dare threaten you or your creature. Marcus felt Ghost tense beside him. The wolf understood perfectly well what was being offered, and what it would cost them. Working for Malik would mean becoming part of his criminal organization, using Ghost's gifts for illegal purposes. It would guarantee their safety, but at the cost of their freedom and integrity. I need to think about it, Marcus said finally. Malik's expression darkened. Thinking time is a luxury you may not have. The rumors about your creature continue to spread. Soon, even my protection may not be enough if the superstitious fools decide to take matters into their own hands. As if to punctuate his words, a commotion erupted near the club's entrance. A group of aliens from various species had gathered, their voices raised in anger and fear. Marcus could make out words like abomination and curse, even through the translator static. You see, Malik gestured toward the disturbance. It begins already. Ghost moved closer to Marcus, his intelligent eyes showing no fear, only determination. In that moment, Marcus realized that whatever decision he made, they would face it together. The bond between them had grown beyond simple friendship into something deeper, a partnership built on mutual respect and trust. 24 hours, Malik said, signaling that the meeting was over. Then you decide, work with me or face the consequences alone. As they left the Black Nebula, Marcus could feel hostile eyes following them through the corridors. The rumors had indeed spread, and Ghost's very presence seemed to trigger primitive fears in species that should have known better. But when Marcus looked down at his companion, he saw no regret in those red eyes, only unwavering loyalty. They had 24 hours to find a solution that didn't involve selling their souls to the most dangerous criminal on Nexus Station. 24 hours to prove that humanity's greatest strength wasn't its technology or weapons, but its ability to find hope in the darkest places. The real test was about to begin. The attack came at dawn during the artificial morning cycle when most of the lower levels were still quiet. Marcus was awakened by Ghost's urgent whining, the wolf pacing anxiously between the workshop's front entrance and his sleeping area. The enhanced senses that made Ghost such an effective partner had detected the approaching danger long before human ears could hear the footsteps in the corridor. What is it, boy? Marcus whispered, immediately alert despite the early hour. Ghost's behavior patterns had become as familiar to him as his own heartbeat, and this level of agitation meant serious trouble. Ghost moved to the workshop's small security monitor and pawed at the screen, a behavior they had developed when he wanted Marcus to check the external cameras. What Marcus saw made his blood run cold. A crowd of nearly 30 aliens from various species had gathered outside his workshop, many of them carrying improvised weapons, and all of them wearing the grim expressions of a lynch mob. At the front of the group was Krex Valdorn, a Zellan religious zealot who had been one of the loudest voices spreading rumors about Ghost's supposed curse. His snake-like features were twisted with fanatic conviction as he addressed the crowd in his species-characteristic, hissing voice. The abomination has brought corruption to our level, Valdorn declared, his words translated by the universal systems into standard Galactic. Equipment failures increase daily. Trade suffers. The very air grows thick with unnatural emanations. Activated the workshop's communication system, hoping to reason with the crowd before violence erupted. Krex, there's no evidence that Ghost has caused any problems. The equipment failures you're talking about are normal maintenance issues. Lies. Valdorn's response was immediate and venomous. Since the White Demon arrived, 17 separate systems have malfunctioned. The The Corvin food vendor reports spoiled inventory. The Tharian merchant's cargo seals failed. The curse spreads like a plague. Ghost moved to Marcus's side, his intelligent red eyes studying the crowd through the monitor. Despite the danger, the wolf showed no fear, only a calm alertness that Marcus found both reassuring and heartbreaking. Ghost understood exactly what was happening, but his trust in Marcus remained absolute. "We demand you surrender the creature for proper disposal," Veldorn continued. "If you refuse, we will take action to protect our community." Marcus looked down at Ghost, who met his gaze with unwavering loyalty. The idea of surrendering his companion to this mob was unthinkable, but he could see that their improvised weapons included plasma cutters and industrial acids that could breach the workshop's security barriers. "I won't let them hurt you," Marcus promised quietly, his hand resting on Ghost's head. The wolf made a soft sound of acknowledgement, then did something that surprised him. Ghost moved to the workshop's tool cabinet and used his teeth to pull out a specific diagnostic scanner, the same one he had used to impress Malik the night before. At first, Marcus didn't understand what Ghost was trying to communicate. Then he looked more closely at the scanner's readouts from their recent calibration, and a wild idea began to form. The equipment failures Voldorn was blaming on Ghost weren't random at all. They followed a specific pattern, affecting systems that all shared common components from the same manufacturer. "Ghost, you brilliant creature," Marcus whispered, understanding flooding through him. "It's not a curse at all." Working quickly, Marcus began pulling up maintenance records from the station's public database, cross-referencing the failure reports with installation dates and component sources. What he found confirmed Ghost's insight. Every single failure involved atmospheric processing units manufactured by Nexus Industrial, all installed within the past 6 months, all using a defective batch of pressure regulators that was slowly degrading. The mob outside was growing more agitated by the minute, but Marcus now had something more valuable than weapons: the truth. He activated the workshop's external broadcast system, projecting his voice clearly to the assembled crowd. "Krex, listen to me," Marcus called out. "I can prove that Ghost isn't responsible for the equipment failures, but I need 5 minutes to show you the real cause." "More human lies," Valdorn hissed back. But Marcus could see some members of the crowd exchanging uncertain glances. The promise of proof was enough to create doubt, even among the superstitious. 5 minutes, Marcus repeated. "If I can't prove Ghost's innocence, I'll come out peacefully." It was a desperate gamble, but Marcus could see the crowd wavering. Their anger was based on fear and superstition, not genuine hatred. If he could provide them with a logical explanation for their troubles, they might listen to reason. Working with practiced efficiency, Marcus connected the diagnostic scanner to the workshop's main computer and began running analysis programs. Ghost sat beside him, occasionally nudging his hand toward specific controls or making soft sounds when Marcus's focus wavered. Their partnership had evolved to the point where Ghost could actually assist with complex technical work, his enhanced intelligence allowing him to understand concepts that would challenge most sentient species. The analysis took 4 minutes and 37 seconds. When it finished, Marcus had a complete breakdown of the defective components, their installation locations, and the progressive failure patterns that had been terrorizing the lower levels. He uploaded the data to a public terminal and activated the workshop's holographic display system. "Citizens of Level 47, Marcus announced, his voice carrying clearly through the corridor. "I present the real cause of your recent problems." A 3-dimensional image appeared above the crowd, showing the internal structure of the defective pressure regulators. The display highlighted stress fractures that had been invisible to normal inspection, but would inevitably lead to system failure within months of installation. "These components were manufactured using substandard materials," Marcus continued, manipulating the display to show failure progression charts. "Every system that has malfunctioned contains these regulators. The failures have nothing to do with Ghost and everything to do with corporate cost-cutting by Nexus Industrial." The crowd's angry murmur began to shift towards confusion and uncertainty. Marcus could see some of them checking their personal data pads, confirming his analysis against their own maintenance records. Furthermore, Marcus added, knowing he had to press his advantage, Ghost's enhanced senses actually detected these failures before they became dangerous. "The diagnostic work we've been doing has prevented 3 potential atmospheric breaches that could have killed dozens of residents." Voldorn was not ready to give up his crusade so easily. "Convenient explanations," he hissed. "How do we know this data's not fabricated? How do we know the albino demon did not cause these defects through its unnatural presence?" It was Ghost himself who provided the answer to that challenge. The wolf moved to the workshop's entrance and activated the door control with his paw, something that never failed to amaze observers. As the barrier slid open, Ghost padded out into the corridor, showing no fear despite facing a hostile crowd armed with weapons. The mob instinctively stepped back, their superstitious dread warring with curiosity. Ghost ignored their reaction entirely, moving directly to a wall-mounted atmospheric monitoring station. Using his teeth, he activated the unit's diagnostic function, then sat patiently while it ran through its self-check routine. When the diagnostic completed, the results were displayed on the public announcement system for everyone to see. The atmospheric processors serving their corridor showed the same stress fractures that Marcus had identified, but the system was still functional. More importantly, the timestamp showed that the defects had been present since installation, months before Ghost's arrival on the station. Impossible, Valdorn breathed, but his conviction was visibly shaking. Ghost wasn't finished with his demonstration. Moving with calm confidence, he approached different members of the crowd and performed a behavior that Marcus had seen before but never fully understood. The wolf would sniff carefully at each person, then look back at Marcus and make specific vocalizations. He's identifying who has been exposed to the chemical byproducts of the failing systems, Marcus realized, translating Ghost signals for the crowd. The stress fractures release trace compounds that most species can't detect, but Ghost can smell them. Sure enough, when the crowd members Ghost had identified checked their personal health monitors, they all showed elevated levels of industrial pollutants in their bloodstream. The curse they had attributed to Ghost's presence was actually low-level poisoning from the defective equipment. The revelation hit the crowd like a physical blow. Their anger began to transform into embarrassment and uncertainty, the comfortable certainty of superstition crumbling in the face of undeniable evidence. But Valdorn was not ready to abandon his position. Even if this is true, the Xelon declared, the creature remains an abomination. Its genetic deviation is an insult to natural order. It should not exist among civilized beings. The words hung in the air like a challenge, and Marcus felt his own anger finally breaking through his careful control. Here was the real heart of the matter. Not fear of bad luck or equipment failure, but simple primitive prejudice against anything different. You're right about one thing, Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly through the corridor. Ghost is genetically modified. He's different from natural wolves. But do you know why he was created? Marcus stepped out of the workshop to stand beside Ghost, his hand resting protectively on the wolf's head. The crowd tensed, but something in his demeanor kept them from retreating. Ghost was engineered to be the perfect companion, Marcus continued. Enhanced intelligence, emotional sensitivity, loyalty that goes beyond instinct. Someone spent enormous resources creating a being capable of forming genuine bonds with other sentient species. And what did the galaxy do with this miracle? They called it worthless and put it up for auction like scrap metal. He could see the crowd listening now, their hostility beginning to waver in the face of his obvious sincerity. You want to talk about what's unnatural. Marcus's voice grew stronger. I'll tell you what's unnatural. It's unnatural to fear someone because they look different. It's unnatural to blame innocent creatures for problems they didn't cause. It's unnatural to destroy something beautiful because you don't understand it. Ghost moved closer to Marcus, pressing against his leg in a gesture of solidarity. The simple act seemed to resonate with some members of the crowd, reminding them of their own relationships with companions and family. Look at him, Marcus said softly. Really look at him. Don't see an albino freak or a genetic abomination. See an intelligent being who has never hurt anyone, who spends his days helping repair the systems that keep you alive, who offers loyalty and friendship to anyone willing to accept it. The crowd was silent now, their weapons lowered as they struggled with concepts that challenged everything they thought they knew about genetic modification and species interaction. It was an elderly Thorian merchant who spoke first. The diagnostic work you mentioned, she said carefully. It prevented atmospheric breaches. 3 separate incidents, Marcus confirmed. Ghost detected the failures before they became critical. Without his help, we would have had explosive decompressions that could have killed dozens of residents. And the chemical contamination, another voice added. You can really identify who has been exposed? In response, Ghost moved through the crowd again, this time identifying additional individuals who showed signs of exposure. Each confirmation further validated his abilities and undermined the superstitious fears that had driven the mob to violence. But it was a young Corvan engineer who asked the question that really mattered. If he can do all this, why was he being auctioned as worthless? Marcus looked down at Ghost, seeing the intelligence and compassion that had transformed his own life. Because most people can't see past the differences to recognize the value underneath. They judge by appearance rather than character, by origin rather than actions. The words carried an implicit challenge to the assembled crowd, and Marcus could see them beginning to understand that their own behavior had proven his point. They had come here ready to commit violence based on nothing more than superstition and prejudice. Voldorn made one last attempt to rally his followers. Pretty words cannot change the fundamental wrongness of genetic manipulation. This creature should not exist. But his support had evaporated. The crowd was already beginning to disperse, their anger replaced by embarrassment and, in some cases, genuine curiosity about the remarkable being they had come to destroy. As the mob melted away, Marcus found himself standing in the corridor with Ghost, both of them alive and unharmed despite facing what had seemed like impossible odds. The wolf looked up at him with those intelligent red eyes, and Marcus could swear he saw pride there, along with the ever-present loyalty that had become the foundation of their relationship. "We did it, boy," Marcus whispered, kneeling to embrace his companion. "We actually did it." But even as he celebrated their victory, Marcus knew this was only the beginning. They had survived one challenge, but Malik's deadline still loomed. The crime boss would not be impressed by their ability to handle a superstitious mob. He would want an answer to his offer of protection, and that answer would determine their future on Nexus Station. The real test of their partnership was still to come. The news of their confrontation with the mob spread through Nexus Station's lower levels like wildfire, but not in the way Marcus had expected. Instead of fear and suspicion, many residents were beginning to look at Ghost with genuine curiosity and even admiration. The revelation about the defective atmospheric processes had saved lives and credits, and word was spreading that the cursed white wolf was actually something of a hero. Marcus noticed the change immediately when he ventured out to purchase supplies later that day. Instead of crossing to the other side of the corridor, some residents actually approached to ask questions about Ghost's abilities. The elderly Tharian merchant who had spoken up during the confrontation even offered them a discount on mechanical components, explaining that Ghost had saved her from expensive repairs to her atmospheric system. "Your companion has remarkable abilities," she said, her translator rendering her clicking speech into standard Galactic. "Perhaps the old stories about albino creatures bringing fortune are more accurate than those about curses." Ghost seemed to sense the change in attitude as well. Where before he had remained close to Marcus's side when they traveled through the station, now he moved with more confidence, his tail held high, and his red eyes bright with interest in their surroundings. Several times residents actually stopped to pet him, an unthinkable development just days earlier. But Marcus knew their newfound popularity was a double-edged sword. If Ghost was becoming famous, that fame would inevitably reach the attention of more dangerous individuals than superstitious merchants and mechanics. The galaxy was full of people who would see Ghost's abilities as something to be exploited, controlled, or destroyed. Those fears were confirmed when Zephyr arrived at the workshop that afternoon, his usually calm demeanor replaced by obvious anxiety. "We have problems," the Altarian announced without preamble. "Multiple problems, all of them serious." Marcus gestured for his friend to sit down while Ghost settled beside them, clearly understanding that this was important news. "The good news is that Malik is impressed by your handling of the mob situation," Zephyr began. "Word reached him within hours, and he sees it as proof of Ghost's value and your ability to think under pressure. And the bad news? The bad news is that you're no longer the only ones interested in Ghost's services." Zephyr's expression darkened. "Malik has received inquiries from 3 separate off-station parties, all wanting to know about purchasing or borrowing your companion." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "What kind of parties?" "The first is a biotechnology corporation based in the Centauri sector. They're claiming Ghost represents stolen intellectual property and demanding his return for proper study. The second is a military contractor looking for enhanced reconnaissance assets. The third..." Zephyr paused, clearly reluctant to continue. "What about the third?" "The third inquiry came from someone identifying themselves as Ghost's original creator." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He looked down at Ghost, who had gone very still, his ears flattened against his head in an expression Marcus had learned to associate with distress. "They want him back?" Marcus asked quietly. "They claim that genetic modifications were never intended for independent operation. According to their message, Ghost was designed as a prototype for a larger project, and his escape from their facility represents a significant security breach." Marcus's mind raced with implications. If Ghost's creators had the legal right to reclaim him, there would be no authority in the galaxy willing to stand against them. Genetic property laws heavily favored the original designers, treating modified organisms as manufactured goods rather than sentient beings. There's more, Zephyr continued reluctantly. Malik has scheduled another meeting for tonight. He wants to discuss the various offers and determine how to proceed. The problem is, he's not thinking of Ghost as your companion anymore. He's thinking of him as a valuable asset that needs to be managed properly. Ghost isn't property, Marcus said firmly. He's a sentient being with his own thoughts and feelings. Whatever his origin, he has the right to choose his own path. Jeffia-ism. You and I know that, Zephyr replied. But Galactic law doesn't agree. Legally, Ghost is classified as an enhanced animal, which means he has no more rights than a sophisticated tool. If his creators can prove ownership, they can reclaim him regardless of his preferences. Ghost made a soft whining sound and moved closer to Marcus, clearly understanding the threat they faced. The wolf's enhanced intelligence meant he grasped the legal and ethical complexities of his situation perfectly, which somehow made it even worse. What does Malik expect from tonight's meeting? Marcus asked. He wants you to bring Ghost and demonstrate his abilities for the potential buyers. After that, he'll negotiate terms for the highest bidder. Zephyr's expression was grim. Marcus, I don't think he intends to give you a choice in the matter anymore. You've become a liability he can't afford. The afternoon passed in tense preparation. Marcus found himself studying Ghost with new eyes, trying to memorize every detail of their partnership, in case this was their last day together. The wolf seemed to understand what was happening, and stayed close, offering comfort through his presence, even as he faced the prospect of losing the only family he had ever known. As evening approached, Marcus made a decision that surprised even himself. Instead of heading directly to Malik's club, he made a detour to the station's public information terminal. If they were going to face their enemies, they needed to understand exactly what they were up against. The research he conducted over the next hour was both enlightening and terrifying. Ghost creators were part of something called the Synthesis Project, a military research initiative focused on developing enhanced biological assets for special operations. The project had been shut down 2 years earlier following ethical violations and security breaches, but several of the lead researchers had disappeared along with their genetic samples. More disturbing was the discovery that Ghost wasn't unique. The files mentioned dozens of similar creatures, all designed for different purposes. Enhanced tracking, specialized combat, psychological warfare. Ghost had been part of the Companion series, designed to form emotional bonds with handlers and provide intelligence gathering in social situations. They didn't create you to be a friend, Marcus whispered to Ghost as they reviewed the files. They created you to be a spy. But Ghost's reaction to this revelation was not what Marcus expected. Instead of distress or confusion, the wolf looked directly at him and made a sound that clearly meant, "So what?" The intelligence in those red eyes conveyed a message more profound than any words could express. Regardless of his original purpose, he had chosen his own identity. They arrived at the Black Nebula to find it transformed. Instead of the usual mix of criminals and lowlifes, the club was filled with beings in expensive clothing and corporate uniforms. Marcus recognized the representatives of major galactic corporations, military contractors, and scientific institutions. Ghost had become a commodity, and tonight was the auction. Malik himself seemed different as well. Where before he had been merely dangerous, tonight he radiated the focused intensity of a businessman conducting a major transaction. He gestured for Marcus and Ghost to join him at his private table, but his attention was clearly on the assembled buyers rather than his guests. Excellent timing, Malik rumbled. Our buyers are eager to see the asset's capabilities. Ghost isn't an asset, Marcus said firmly. He's my partner. Malik's small eyes fixed on Marcus with predatory focus. Your partnership has been profitable, human, but tonight we discuss business on a much larger scale. The offers I have received exceed anything your small repair operation could generate in a lifetime. Before Marcus could respond, a figure approached their table that made his blood run cold. Dr. Elena Voss was exactly as described in the Synthesis Project files. Tall, pale, with the cold eyes of someone who viewed sentient beings as experimental data. She moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting what she wanted. So this is Subject 17, she said, studying Ghost with clinical detachment. He appears to be in good health despite his escape from proper containment. Ghost's reaction was immediate and visceral. His hackles rose, his lips pulled back to reveal sharp teeth, and a low growl emerged from his throat. It was the first time Marcus had ever seen Ghost display genuine aggression, and the intensity of his reaction told the story more clearly than any words could. He remembers you, Marcus observed. Of course he does, Doctor. Voss replied dismissively. Enhanced memory was one of his primary modifications. along with increased intelligence, emotional manipulation capabilities, and specialized sensory packages.
Emotional manipulation. Marcus felt sick at the implications.
The companion series was designed to form deep emotional bonds with target subjects, then exploit those bonds for intelligence-gathering purposes. Subject 17 represents thousands of hours of genetic engineering and behavioral conditioning. Marcus looked at Ghost, seeing him for a moment not as his loyal companion, but as a sophisticated biological weapon designed to infiltrate and betray. But then Ghost looked back at him, and Marcus saw something that Dr. Voss had clearly never expected. Genuine choice. Maybe that's what you designed him to be, Marcus said quietly. But it's not what he became. Doctor? Voss laughed coldly. Anthropomorphization is a common mistake when dealing with enhanced animals. You're projecting human emotions onto sophisticated programming. Subject 17 doesn't have genuine feelings any more than your ship's computer does. It was Ghost himself who proved her wrong. Instead of responding to Marcus, the wolf turned to face Dr. Voss directly. His growling stopped, replaced by a steady, intelligent stare that made her take an involuntary step backward. Then, with deliberate precision, Ghost moved to Marcus's side and sat down, pressing against his leg in a gesture that was unmistakably protective. Interesting, Dr. Voss admitted, though her clinical tone never wavered. His conditioning appears to have adapted beyond original parameters. Still, he remains corporate property, and I have the legal documentation to prove it. Legal documentation means nothing if the subject is unwilling to comply, Malik interjected. A hostile asset is worthless for intelligence work. Hostility can be corrected through reconditioning, Dr. Voss replied. A few weeks in proper laboratory conditions will restore his original programming. The casual way she discussed erasing Ghost's personality and memories sent rage coursing through Marcus. This woman saw his best friend as nothing more than malfunctioning equipment to be repaired, with no consideration for the sentient being Ghost had become.
Over my dead body, Marcus said, his voice carrying absolute conviction.
That can be arranged, Dr. Voss replied coldly. But before anyone could respond to the threat, Ghost did something that surprised everyone in the room. He stood up and walked directly to Dr. Mim, Voss showing no fear despite her obvious hostility. When he reached her, he sat down and looked up at her expectantly. What is he doing? Malik asked, clearly confused by this development. Marcus was wondering the same thing until he saw the expression in Ghost's eyes. There was no submission there, no fear, only a calm intelligence that had made a calculated decision. He's making a choice, Marcus realized. He's showing everyone that he understands the situation and is capable of deciding his own fate. Dr. Voss reached down to attach a restraint collar to Ghost's neck, clearly expecting compliance. Instead, Ghost simply stood up and walked back to Marcus, leaving her holding empty air. The message was unmistakable. He had evaluated his options and chosen his human. Remarkable, Doctor. Voss breathed, her clinical detachment finally cracking. His cognitive development has exceeded all projections. This level of autonomous decision-making was never part of his design. Maybe that's because you never understood what you were creating, Marcus said. You engineered intelligence and emotion, then acted surprised when those traits developed beyond your control. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. If Ghost was capable of genuine autonomous choice, the legal questions surrounding his ownership became much more complex. Several of the corporate representatives were already looking uncomfortable, clearly recognizing the potential public relations nightmare of forcing a sentient being into servitude. But Dr. Voss was not ready to give up her claim. Enhanced or not, Subject 17 represents proprietary genetic modifications worth millions of credits. I will not allow him to remain in unauthorized hands. It was Malik who provided the solution, though not in the way anyone expected. Voss, the crime boss said calmly. You mentioned that your original project was shut down due to ethical violations. Perhaps you would care to explain those violations to our distinguished guests. The color drained from Dr. Paul. Voss's face. That information is classified. Not anymore, Malik replied, activating a holographic display above their table. I took the liberty of researching your background before tonight's meeting. The synthesis project was terminated when investigators discovered that you were conducting unauthorized experiments on sentient subjects, including several species protected under galactic law. The display showed official reports detailing Dr. Voss's violations, genetic experiments on unwilling subjects, creation of hybrid creatures designed for psychological warfare, and the systematic violation of every ethical standard governing biological research. The assembled corporate representatives began moving away from her table, clearly wanting to distance themselves from the scandal. Furthermore, Malik continued, your current legal status shows several outstanding warrants for crimes against sentience. I believe the Galactic Council would be very interested to know your current location. Doctor. Voss realized she had walked into a trap. Her obsession with reclaiming Ghost had led her directly to someone with the resources and connections to destroy her. She looked around the room, seeing only hostile faces and closed doors. This isn't over, she said, backing toward the exit. Subject 17 belongs to me, regardless of your threats. Actually, Marcus said quietly, he belongs to himself. And he's already made his choice. As if to emphasize the point, Ghost moved to the club's entrance and activated the door controls, holding it open for Dr. Voss in a gesture that was both polite and dismissive. The message was clear. She was welcome to leave, but Ghost would not be going with her after Dr. Part. Voss's hasty departure, the mood in the club shifted dramatically. The corporate representatives who had come to bid on Ghost began reassessing the situation, clearly uncomfortable with the ethical implications of purchasing a sentient being against his will. But Marcus knew this was only a temporary victory. Doctor. Voss would return with better preparation and legal support. The corporations would find other ways to pursue their interests, and Malik would expect compensation for his protection. The real test of their partnership was still ahead, and the choices they made in the next few hours would determine not just their own fate, but the future of enhanced beings throughout the galaxy. The auction was over, but the war for Ghost's freedom had just begun. 6 months later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the research vessel Harmony's Dream, watching the stars wheel slowly past as the ship completed another successful mission. Beside him, Ghost sat calmly, his white fur now bearing the insignia of the Galactic Council's Special Investigation Division. His red eyes bright with contentment and purpose. The transformation in their lives had been nothing short of miraculous. What had begun as a desperate fight for Ghost's freedom had evolved into something neither of them could have imagined. A new model for human-enhanced being cooperation that was changing the galaxy's understanding of genetic modification and artificial intelligence. Control to Field Team Alpha, came the voice through Marcus's communicator. We're receiving distress signals from the Kepler station. Possible biological containment breach. Are you available to investigate? Marcus looked down at Ghost, who was already standing and moving toward their equipment lockers. After months of working together as an official team, they had developed an almost telepathic understanding of each other's thoughts and intentions. Control, this is Alpha Team, Marcus replied. We're en route to Kepler Station. Estimated arrival in 4 hours. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of activity following their confrontation with Dr. Voss at the Black Nebula. Malik had proven to be an unexpected ally, using his connections and resources to ensure that Ghost's case received attention at the highest levels of galactic government. The crime boss had his own reasons for supporting their cause. The potential profits from legitimate enhanced being research far exceeded anything his illegal operations could generate. But it was Ghost himself who had provided the breakthrough that changed everything. During the formal hearing before the Galactic Council's Ethics Committee, Ghost had done something unprecedented. He had testified on his own behalf. Using a combination of vocalizations, physical gestures, and an specially designed interface that translated his thoughts into text, Ghost had demonstrated beyond doubt that he was a fully sentient being, capable of complex reasoning, emotional depth, and moral judgment. His testimony had been eloquent, moving, and utterly devastating to those who claimed he was merely sophisticated programming. I remember being created, Ghost had testified through the translation interface. I remember the first moments of awareness, the confusion, the fear. I remember learning to trust, learning to love, learning to hope. These are not programmed responses. They are the experiences of a living being who chooses to value friendship over servitude, cooperation over exploitation. The Council's decision had been unanimous. Ghost was a sentient being with full rights under galactic law, setting a precedent that would protect thousands of other enhanced creatures throughout known space. Dr. Voss's claims of ownership were rejected, and she herself was placed under arrest for her previous violations of sentience protection laws. But Ghost's victory had opened new possibilities that neither he nor Marcus had anticipated. The Galactic Council's Special Investigation Division had been looking for new approaches to dealing with biological threats and genetic crimes, and Ghost's unique abilities made him the perfect candidate for their specialized response teams. The work was dangerous but fulfilling. Enhanced beings like Ghost could detect biological hazards that traditional scanners missed, could navigate environments too dangerous for unmodified personnel, and could establish communication with alien species that had never encountered galactic civilization. Most importantly, they could do all of this while maintaining the moral and ethical standards that made them true partners rather than mere tools. As the Harmony's Dream approached Kepler Station, Marcus and Ghost prepared for what had become their standard investigation protocol. Ghost would use his enhanced sensors to identify the nature of the biological threat, while Marcus provided technical analysis and communication support. Together, they could assess and contain situations that would be impossible for either to handle alone. Initial scans show massive contamination in the station's agricultural section, reported Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, the ship's science officer, and Marcus's sister. She had joined the Special Investigation Division after learning about their work, bringing her expertise in xenobiology to complement their unique partnership.
Any indication of what we're dealing with? Marcus asked, reviewing the preliminary data on his portable scanner.
Unknown biological agent, Sarah replied. It's affecting the station's crop systems, but the contamination patterns don't match any known pathogens. The station's chief scientist requested our specific team, claiming the situation requires enhanced sensory analysis. Ghost moved to the ship's main scanner array and began his own investigation. Over the months, they had developed a system where Ghost could interface directly with sensor equipment, his enhanced intelligence allowing him to interpret data in ways that complemented electronic analysis. His ears perked up as he detected something in the scanner readings that the instruments had missed. "What is it, boy?" Marcus asked, using the casual address that had become their private signal for serious investigation work. Ghost moved to their communication interface and input a series of symbols that translated as familiar genetic markers, synthesis project derivation. Artificial organism designed for agricultural infiltration. Marcus felt his blood run cold, even months after Dr. Rosamount Voss's arrest. They were still discovering the full extent of her illegal research. The synthesis project had created dozens of biological weapons disguised as agricultural or environmental samples, and many of them were still unaccounted for. Control. "We have a potential synthesis project situation," Marcus reported, requesting immediate backup and full hazmat protocols. "Acknowledged, Alpha Team. Backup is en route, but you're clear to begin preliminary investigation. Be advised that Kepler Station has critical food production contracts for 3 separate colonies. If contamination spreads, millions of beings could face starvation." The pressure of the situation was enormous, but Marcus felt only calm confidence as he and Ghost prepared for deployment. Their partnership had been tested in dozens of similar emergencies, and they had never failed to find a solution. As their shuttle approached Kepler Station's docking bay, Marcus reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this point. What had begun as a desperate act of compassion at a seedy auction had evolved into a revolution in interspecies cooperation. Ghost was no longer the frightened, unwanted creature that no one had bid on. He was a respected member of the galactic community, a bridge between species, and proof that consciousness and dignity could emerge from the most unexpected sources. Kepler Station Control, this is Special Investigation Team Alpha requesting priority docking, Marcus announced as they approached the station. "Alpha Team, you're cleared for emergency docking at Bay 7. Station Chief Yarlath is waiting to brief you immediately." The station's interior showed clear signs of the crisis they were facing. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows through corridors that should have been bustling with activity, while automated systems continuously announced containment protocols in a dozen different languages. The few personnel they encountered looked exhausted and stressed, clearly pushed beyond their normal limits by the ongoing emergency. Chief Yarlath was a Kandorian, one of the insectoid species known for their expertise in biological systems. His compound eyes tracked their approach with obvious relief, while his translator rendered his clicking speech into urgent standard Galactic. "Thank the void you're here," Yarlath began immediately. "The contamination started 3 days ago in Agricultural Bay 12. Since then, it's spread to 5 additional bays, destroying crops worth millions of credits. Worse, we can't identify what we're dealing with. Show us the affected areas," Marcus requested, while Ghost began his preliminary sensory survey of the station's atmosphere. As they moved through the station's agricultural section, Marcus could see the devastation for himself. What should have been thriving fields of grain and vegetables had been reduced to withered, blackened stalks covered in an oily substance that seemed to shimmer with unnatural colors. The smell was overwhelming, a mixture of decay, chemicals, and something else that his human senses couldn't identify. But Ghost showed no difficulty with the environment. His enhanced olfactory system was designed to detect biological agents at the molecular level, and Marcus could see him analyzing scents with the focused intensity of a living sensor array. After several minutes of investigation, Ghost moved to their communication interface and began inputting his findings. Artificial organism confirmed. The translation read, designed to mimic natural fungal infection but with synthetic reproductive mechanisms. Primary purpose appears to be food supply disruption rather than direct harm to sentient beings. Genetic markers match Synthesis Project database. Marcus studied the data Ghost had provided, cross-referencing it with their files on known Synthesis Project weapons. What he found confirmed his worst fears. This was a delayed activation biological weapon designed to lay dormant until triggered by specific environmental conditions. Dr. Voss had planted it here during her illegal research years earlier, and it had only recently activated. Chief Yarlith, we need immediate access to your station's environmental control systems, Marcus said. This isn't a natural contamination. It's a biological weapon designed to destroy food production. The revelation sent shockwaves through the station's command staff. The idea that someone had deliberately poisoned their agricultural systems was almost incomprehensible, but the evidence was undeniable. Working with Ghost's enhanced analytical abilities, Marcus was able to trace the contamination back to its original source, a shipment of agricultural enhancement supplements that had been delivered to the station 2 years earlier. The supplements had been designed to remain inert until activated by specific atmospheric conditions, creating a delayed effect weapon that could devastate food production without being traced back to its creators. But understanding the weapon was only the first step. They still needed to stop it from spreading and reverse the damage it had already caused. This was where Ghost's unique nature became invaluable. His genetically enhanced intelligence allowed him to understand the biological weapon's structure at a level no natural organism could achieve, while his wolf instincts gave him insights into predator-prey relationships that applied even to artificial organisms. The weapon has a weakness, Ghost indicated through their interface. Its synthetic nature makes it vulnerable to specific frequency disruptions. Natural organisms develop resistance, but artificial ones follow rigid programming. Marcus understood immediately. By using the station's industrial sonic equipment to generate precise frequency patterns, they could disrupt the weapon's reproductive cycle and cause it to self-destruct. It was an elegant solution that used the weapon's artificial nature against itself. The implementation took 18 hours of continuous work, with Marcus coordinating the technical aspects while Ghost provided biological analysis and monitoring. As the sonic frequencies penetrated the contaminated areas, the artificial organism began to break down, its unnatural components unable to adapt to the unexpected environmental pressure. By the time their backup teams arrived, the crisis was over. The contaminated crops were being cleared away, new seeds were being planted, and Kepler Station was returning to normal operations. Most importantly, they had prevented the weapon from spreading to other agricultural facilities, potentially saving millions of lives. Remarkable work, Chief Yarlith said as they prepared to depart. Without your team's unique capabilities, we would have lost everything. The colonies that depend on our food production owe you their lives. As the Harmony's dream left Kepler Station behind, Marcus found himself once again marveling at the path their lives had taken. Ghost had evolved from an unwanted auction item to a respected member of the Galactic community, while Marcus had transformed from a struggling mechanic to a specialist in enhanced being cooperation. But more than their professional success, it was their personal bond that truly mattered. Ghost was no longer just his companion or partner. He had become family in the truest sense. Their relationship had proven that consciousness and dignity were not limited to naturally evolved species, that artificial enhancement could create genuine sentience rather than mere simulation. Control to Alpha Team, came the familiar voice through their communicator. We're receiving reports of possible enhanced being trafficking in the Vega sector. Suspected Synthesis Project survivors attempting to recreate their research. Are you available for investigation? Marcus looked at Ghost, who was already moving toward their equipment with the eager anticipation that marked the beginning of every mission. Their work was far from over. Dr. Voss's arrest had disrupted the Synthesis Project, but it hadn't eliminated